Sure I'm getting the right thing. Okay. So we are here today to talk about the Port St. Lucie Public Art Master Plan. And it is a project of the City of Port St. Lucie and the Port St. Lucie Public Art Advisory Board, which is a component of the city. A little bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to go through who we are, Designing Local, talk a little bit about the existing public art in Port St. Lucie and how the program is set up. We're also going to do an overview of what the plan is, and then we're going to also talk about public art, because I know you guys are artists, but I don't know your familiarity with public art as a concept on the scale that we're talking about in Port St. Lucie. So we're going to go through that, and then we have time at the end if there are additional questions or discussion. But like I said, please feel free to ask your questions throughout the presentation. So who are we at Designing Local? We are an urban planning firm, and we specialize in kind of three different things. We do historic preservation work, we do urban design, and we also do placemaking and public art. So we do, in terms of public art, we're not artists, we're urban planners, but we do planning, policies, procurement, managing selection processes. We do larger scale cultural planning, grant writing, all those kinds of things as it relates to public art. And we work all over the country. So we are actually based in Ohio. So we are in Columbus, Ohio, but our work is very national. So as you can see on here, we are working, or have worked basically in all quadrants of the country. So this is a little bit older. Port St. Lucie isn't on here yet, but right now we're working in Port St. Lucie and Colorado and a few other places around the country. So let's talk a little bit about the Port St. Lucie Public Art Program itself, what it is, how it's set up. So the Public Art Program is actually set up through an ordinance that City Council passed, and it funds public art, or requires it, as part of new construction projects, not single family homes, but any other of these large scale construction projects that you see happening around town, whether it's a hotel or a restaurant, or a giant development, subdivision or mixed use development. All of those are required to either include public art in their development at a cost of 1% of the development up to $100,000, or they can pay a fee to the city that's 80% of that costs. So the public art that you see around Port St. Lucie currently comes to us one of two ways for the most part. It's either being paid for by the city through the fees that developers are paying, or it's being paid for directly by a developer and being installed on their property. And so we have a few examples here. This one is at Traditions, I believe. And so this is funded through the program, installed by the developer at their development. We have a few that are upcoming. So this one is being installed in a roundabout, and this is directly solicited by the city. So it's an exciting one. This one, and this is a mock-up of a future piece of public art being installed by a developer. So this is kind of a cool one, and it's being integrated into the landscape. There's a series of these agave style pieces. So there's a variety of public art. One of the things that we're doing as part of this plan is actually documenting all of the existing public art and mapping it, and we're going to have it all available on a website in the future. So that will be exciting, but this gives you a little sense of the type of public art that currently is out there. So what are we doing? What is the Public Art Master Plan doing? You may have seen these cards have been placed around the city by Patty and other folks. and they're asking for soliciting feedback from folks. So what we're doing as part of this planning effort is really comprehensive. So we've already done some research and documentation when we were able to travel. I have been to Port St. Lucie twice so far. We did Patty and I did a wide scale tour of Port St. Lucie, looking at every piece of it. You know, it's pretty geographically large, so that's great. There's lots of opportunities. We have a work plan that we're, you know, modifying right now because of things that we've been dealing with as part of this. And we are currently working on a project website that will ultimately house all the long-term information for the Port St. Lucie. And Joanne from the Art League has also graciously set up a website on the Art League's page that is really helpful and has a lot of this information as well. So in the future, or actually right now, obviously we're doing engagement, talking to you folks, and we had plans to do a lot of in-person engagement and at different festivals and things like that, so we could reach out to people. We're now kind of transitioning, like everyone else, into doing things in a different way. We also have a survey up. So again, this is the other side of that card that you may have seen around town. And so we are asking people to answer some questions, give us some feedback about things that they would like to see in terms of public art in Port St. Lucie. And so people can go to this website right here, cityofpsl.com/public-art. Hopefully all of you have either taken the survey or can take it after this. We would love if you would share that, because especially with the lack of public gatherings, it's kind of hampering our efforts to get the word out about, you know, the plan and what folks would like to see. So please do share this on social media if you can. So we are going to be articulating a vision for Port St. Lucie, creating a plan for that. That will be, you know, the public art master plan. The final document will be a very pretty graphic plan that we'll have available online and in person, hopefully, for folks to come see and check out. And it will really set forth a vision for public art, and we'll talk more about what exactly that looks like in the future. But that vision will really be kind of talking about locations, what types of locations people would like to see public art, and what, you know, how the processes should be set up for public art to be selected. And ultimately we'll complete all of that, and then we'll do a final presentation to City Council and residents. So that's just a little overview of how the plan is working. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right. Like I said, feel free to ask questions throughout the process. You can unmute yourself, or you're also welcome to ask a question in the chat, and we'll get it there. So let's talk a little bit about public art itself. Question?
No, I just unmuted myself.
Oh, no worries. So let's talk a little bit about public art and what it can do for Port St. Lucie. You know, public art has a history of being this kind of idea of like monumental pieces of art, men on horseback. You know, that's kind of the traditional view that you might have of public art, or folks might have of public art. The way public art is being implemented these days is certainly much different than it has been in the past. Some of it is still kind of in that vein. Maybe it celebrates different things. So this is actually from New York City. They have a program, or I'm sorry, this is from Richmond, Virginia, but New York City also has a similar program where they're representing female leaders, past and present, in the built environment. But still kind of in the same vein of that monumental type of public art that we think of, these bronzes of of folks. But for us, one of the things we really care about is figuring out how to transform spaces that are mundane into spaces that are more interesting. And so what, you know, this is a parking garage where they're using concrete pillars to represent some very cool images, more of a mural-based piece of public art. You know, there are opportunities in Port St. Lucie to change kind of some mundane spots into things that are much more interesting. This is in the Northeast, and this is you can kind of make it out. There's a face. Depends on what angle you're looking at, whether or not you can recognize that it's a face or not. But this is actually a transit station. And these are faces, an artist used faces of regular riders to create these kind of interesting pieces that look different from different angles. You know, this is just a fence, but you can turn a fence into a really interesting piece of public art. Things that are really unexpected are really popular these days. You know, this is a blow up rabbit, as you can see. We see more, you know, that's very whimsical, very fun. These are the types of things that people love to go get their picture taken in front of. There's going to be kind of a smaller scale whimsical installation like this called Imagine that's going to go in near the Botanical Garden. I'm not sure if we have dates on that any longer with the current situation, but so these kind of more fun things that really pop out at you and change the environment in unexpected ways are really interesting. These are types of things that we really get excited about because they inspire folks in such a different way than some of the more traditional things. There's space for both, but it's really interesting that we can do things like this that really enliven the environment. Yes.
Is that or are those, you know, is it a temporary sculpture which can be changed out, or is it a permanent fixture?
This installation in particular is a temporary installation. I think it's more, you can kind of, obviously they look like they're blow up. I think they are. And there's some more tactical little like plants and stuff just kind of sitting in this square. And, you know, as we have started this process, I think we've already had some discussions about opportunities to do things that are more temporary like this and things that are also permanent. And the nice thing about the way that the public art program is funded in Port St. Lucie is that it allows for the city to do temporary pieces. Some cities fund their entire program through their capital improvement budget that the city has. So they devote 1% of their capital improvements towards public art. And that means that those have to be capital expenses, which means it has to be a piece of permanent public art. But in Port St. Lucie, that's not how it's funded, and it allows us more flexibility. So we hope to be talking about more projects like this. And I think that there's an appetite for that, at least that we've heard that so far in our discussions. So we're really excited about that. This is another idea of something unexpected. This is actually in Columbus. This is, you know, where we live. And it's really easy for us to recognize how these unexpected things can change the environment, and because this is in our own city, and these are like human style deer that are sitting out there. The river that runs through Columbus is actually named, I think, like the name in the Native American language means like hair of the deer. And so the artist wanted to celebrate this idea of a connection to deer, and also do something that's very whimsical. So I can't tell you how many people come out and take their wedding photos next to this thing. They take their, you know, in the winter, people always go out and put scarves on it. At Christmas, they put like a little Rudolph nose on it. You know, it's something that people really engage with and celebrate, and you see it in, and actually when you land at the airport in Columbus, this is blown up in a massive scale shot of the city with the deer right in the foreground. So these are the types of things that can really create an image of a city and that people want they just love it because it's cool, it's fun, it's unique, and it really like has a different, it just has a different feel, creates that fun, exciting environment. So these are things that we like to think about and we like to see. You know, more unexpected things. I wanted to show some of these pieces that are kind of water related, because there is water in Port St. Lucie and there are opportunities to do things. And again, this is the type of thing that kind of just jumps out at you and really creates a different feel. Going back to that idea, we showed some parking garages, we showed some other things. This is another parking garage, and this is a Christian Moeller piece. And this is at an airport. And so these are kind of hands that that I think he took from folks that are working at the airport. And really, this is an idea of turning something that's really ugly, using something to create a functional piece of art. So obviously, this is a screen on the parking garage. There are other forms of functional public art that we see. Bike racks are a big one. I know Amanda was talking about this previously, and she had said that one of the things that they heard, this is a program in Pittsburgh to do public art bike racks, and like people don't want to use this as a bike rack because it's a like pretty piece of public art. But I guess that's a good problem to have, because we love seeing these things in the built environment. And when we're already doing some things, you know, there's already an opportunity to enhance that with public art. So one of the things that we've been talking about in Port St. Lucie so far is doing public art as it relates to bus shelters that are going to be installed. So again, these are good opportunities to showcase public art in things that are already being done, maybe saving us some money and enhancing these things with fun and creativity. Another one that we're seeing a lot of these days is lighting. So this is a lighting installation in Birmingham, Alabama. And the idea here is turning a space that seems to be maybe uncomfortable. It's not a place that people want to spend time. And this is helping to reconnect two different neighborhoods and really turning a spot that is very ugly and overlooked and feels unsafe into something with an aesthetic value that people are attracted to, want to spend time in, and really helping reconnect communities. We don't necessarily have spaces like this in Port St. Lucie since it's a newer community, but there are always places that can be, you know, their security and safety and comfort of people visiting it can be enhanced by using things like lighting and other public art to really enhance the environment. You know, and why does this overall, why does this matter for Port St. Lucie? Like, why are we talking about public art in the first place? I mean, you guys are artists, so you understand the value of art, but why public art in particular, and why does it have value? And it's again about drawing, it's about drawing people in, creating the uniqueness that connects people with the community. So Port St. Lucie is a new city. I mean, as cities go, especially of its size, founded in the 1960s. So we're really thinking about how do we create an environment that has that unexpectedness, that has that interest, that creates those connections from people. So maybe in Port St. Lucie, it's not a downtown in the traditional sense, but maybe it's using what public spaces we do have or are building, enhancing those with public art and drawing more people in. So that's certainly one of the, you know, reasons we're doing this, because in a city like Port St. Lucie that's newer, we don't necessarily have those unexpected places. So we have to create interesting spaces, and we can do that using public art. And ultimately, it comes back to creating economic value. You know, we're having to sell this, we are having to sell to developers and to city council members and other leadership. Why are we spending money on this? And ultimately, it's because the money that we're spending on it, we're getting back in droves, because we are creating a community where people want to start their businesses, where people want to move and live. And we are really drawing people in a way that we, you know, couldn't do otherwise. And this is, this is a great example of how that happens. This is a piece done by an artist named Janet Eckelman. She works out of Boston. And this is actually in Portugal. And it is over a roundabout. So this big green space you see here is a roundabout. And it was never meant for use by the public. It was just supposed to be a roundabout that was landscaped. But by putting this really interesting piece of public art there, it just always draws people in. People just go out there and sit under it and enjoy the day. And so it's really drawing people to this space when it was a place that people didn't experience ever and weren't even really meant to. They ended up having to add sidewalks because so many people were going into the center of this space. But interestingly enough, and I don't know if this is true anymore, but when you used to, a couple years ago, when you would type in Portugal on Google Maps, it would take you here, and it would actually, it would show a picture of this, like on Portugal, as the country of Portugal would have this piece of public art pop up because it was so popular and really created that space. So that's what we're looking to do in Port St. Lucie, is use public art to create this type of environment in the community. And we're also thinking about how can we express the values of Port St. Lucie in, in public. So this is an installation in LA, and this is folks that were affected by, well, they have one of the largest populations of Armenians outside of Armenia, I guess, in LA. And so this is celebrating that community, helping them to tell their stories. So these are older members of the community. And so how can we use public art to help tell the story of Port St. Lucie and express those values out into the public? Well, one of the things that we need to do is learn what that looks like. So that's one of the questions that we're asking as part of our survey. And one of the questions I'd like to ask you right now is what is the essence of Port St. Lucie? What things are unique about Port St. Lucie? What stands out? What are the types of things that we could celebrate? So I'd love to hear from any of you that have thoughts on like what this looks like for Port St. Lucie. Feel free to unmute yourself, or again, if you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you if you need help with that. But also feel free to comment in the chat. Anyone have any thoughts? Obviously what we've seen so far.
I have a thought.
Yeah.
We're like a bedroom community that's kind of separate. We're not next to a large urban area, with the exception of the beaches. Okay, so you could kind of look at us as a bedroom community to the Barrier Reef Islands. Okay, on both sides of the intercoastal. So I look at it as it, in terms of part of what the essence of this town is, it's kind of real close to a beach town.
Yeah. And I also get from that this idea of it being, if it's a place that has a lot of families, if it's people that are, commuting to different areas for work. So something that we need to think about and do is, help connect those folks to the built environment.
You're exactly right, insofar as before the present situation that we're in. In St. Lucie County, and particularly here in Port St. Lucie, there's never been a whole lot of employment. There's never been a whole lot of jobs in Port St. Lucie or St. Lucie County. People who live here typically travel north and south and west for work. So they're working, they might be working in Martin County, they might be working in Indian River County, they might be working as far as Palm Beach County, but they live here. So you're right in terms of it's again, a bedroom community to these other places, because people who reside here, there's not a large majority of them that actually work here.
One other thing, we have the Met Stadium. We have the training stadium for the, I don't know when we'll be able to utilize it again, but that's a big thing in St. Lucie West, which is in the opposite end of the beach. All the way up.
And one of the things, I just bring this up because it's kind of cool, and I think it's installed, and Patty, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but actually as part of the renovation of the stadium, they had to install a piece of public art because it fell under the ordinance. And so they installed a really, we had a lot of discussions about it, a really kind of interesting piece of public art that celebrates the Mets, and especially for New Yorkers in Florida and in Port St. Lucie, that it has this kind of interesting special connection, and it was designed by the same guy that designed a piece of art at the Mets Stadium in New York. So there's a piece of public art there now, even more reason to celebrate.
Not sure it's lit because there's no activity, but it might be. It's on the elevator shaft facing University.
Yeah, so if you need to go out on a joyride to get out of the house, go check that out.
Well done.
Just not at night. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Port St. Lucie River.
Absolutely. And that's not only one of the things that we want to celebrate in our public art, but one of the things we want to figure out how to highlight. There's the new river walk going in, might even be completed now. It was moving right along the last time I was in Port St. Lucie about a month ago. Yeah, and okay, so it's still under construction, but we're thinking about like, how do we use that? How do we use the parkland along the river to celebrate the river, and then how do we use the river to inspire other things in the community?
It's actually an estuary.
Or estuary, yeah.
Sorry.
Even better, we could teach people about that. Other thoughts or comments? All right, well, I want to talk a little bit about location types. And what I mean by this is, we're doing two things as part of this plan in terms of art locations. We're going to be looking at some specific locations, but so we're going to be looking at very specific locations. But if there are, in the future, it's a very large community. We're not exactly sure where, things are going to be happening in the long term, but we want to think about location types. So what types of locations exist in Port St. Lucie, and where could art go in those locations? So I've pulled out a few types of locations that we have, looked at as part of other planning processes. And so let's just go through those and we can see some examples, and then would love to hear your thoughts on maybe locations that this could happen in Port St. Lucie, or also just generally speaking, what types of locations we'd like to see things at. So love murals, and murals obviously require a very specific type of site. And this is actually an example of a flood wall in southern Ohio along the Ohio River, and they've turned this entire flood wall into a large-scale mural that tells the history of the community. Very kind of interesting pieces and very well done. But obviously this is a big blank wall, so that's the type of place that murals work. Less types of that, or less location types like this in Port St. Lucie, and like this with kind of these more buildings that provide opportunities than maybe in some other kind of older communities that have backs of buildings and things like that. But obviously murals can be done on all types of things, whether it's a building facade or a blank wall somewhere. another interesting kind of piece of public art. But again, you know, we don't necessarily have the historic building types in Port St. Lucie, but are there other locations, whether, you know, on backs of strip mall buildings or on parking garages, or like how the city has done, they have if you've seen out at the city hall, there's kind of a big wall that was constructed that actually houses a mural on it that is going to be redone. Also gateways. So this is another piece from Columbus on a kind of big gateway to the downtown area. One of the more popular places, and I showed you an example earlier, that's going to be installed in Port St. Lucie are roundabouts. Those make sense as gateways. Are there other gateways in Port St. Lucie where people are entering the community that makes sense for public art? One of the things that I think was, just as an aside, on my last trip to Port St. Lucie, Patty had given me a call and to check and see where I was. And I said, well, I know I just pulled into Port St. Lucie because I saw one of the utility box murals as I got off the highway. So, you know, really art is an indicator, especially in a community that's large and sprawling and you know, that has other communities around it that have similar type of environments. So art is a really great opportunity to kind of signify that you've entered a place. This is another, the roundabout art. This is actually in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's a piece called Sticks. You can't really quite get the scale of it from this picture, but these are like 40-foot tall sticks, for lack of a better word. They're actually made from something like a telephone pole, and they're painted, and they're right in the middle of a roundabout, and it's really cool. It's right on the edge of downtown Nashville. A really interesting thing to both engage with and kind of see from a distance. So, you know, as more roundabouts are being installed, where appropriate, it does give that opportunity. You know, these waterfront is something that Port St. Lucie does have some of, maybe not as much of as other communities in the area, but there are some opportunities for kind of these kind of gateways in the water, but also parkland. Parks, of course, are a huge opportunity for public art generally. And in a place like Port St. Lucie that doesn't necessarily have a downtown or a place where people congregate, the parks tend to be more of an opportunity because that is a place where people congregate. Obviously not right now. This is in Denver. I don't know if anybody has seen this in person, but this is at their convention center. So those types of public spaces are really good opportunities for public art because, again, the large people are gathering there. I know the Art League, last time I was in town, I went to the convention. I forget the name of it, sorry for that, but the little gallery that is in Port St. Lucie, and it's really cool that there's already some art there. There's definitely more opportunities for art at that location. But yeah, again, these kind of big public spaces that exist. And then there's the kind of more off the beaten path, hidden types of places. You know, this is along a highway. Places that are still visible, but maybe not necessarily places where you would typically think of as having public art, but that could definitely use that. And then, you know, in that same vein of like these hidden spaces, one fun thing that we've seen lately, and actually a place that we worked in ended up implementing this type of program of their own, is you know, this is a dumpster mural series. You could do all kinds of different little things that are hidden and in the, you know, in the back of places, but that have that kind of whimsical quality to them. And this is another piece by that same artist that I showed you earlier. This is Janet Eckelman, and this is in Greensboro, North Carolina. And it's a really, really cool place. Amanda and I actually took this picture. We happened to be going to North Carolina for something else, and we're able to stop and see this piece. And again, you know, this artist is really great at pulling people together and using public art in public spaces to create the types of places where people want to go. There was just a pickup football game going on. The park, which was kind of in a otherwise desolate area of their downtown, really was full of people, and it was a Tuesday night that we were there. And it really helped. What was so interesting about it is that not only was it full of people, but it was clearly a diverse group of people, in every manner of you could think about, definitely financially, definitely racially. It was just kind of pulling people together and creating this space where people are just going to go to and interact. So, again, using public art in public spaces is huge for us. So I would love to get your thoughts on, where public art could go in Port St. Lucie. And again, that can mean what exact place specifically, or just generally what types of places you think public art would work really well in Port St. Lucie. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Have to be in strip shopping centers to liven them up a little.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have Tradition, which is a section of Port St. Lucie. And then there's some older strip shopping centers. I mean, the mall is not, Port St. Lucie, people go there, but that's actually in Jensen Beach. So would have said the mall, but we don't have a mall.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And one of the, I think the piece I showed, that was actually at Traditions, or Tradition is, that was nice. And I stayed at a hotel, a newly built hotel, the last time I was in Port St. Lucie. And I was so excited because they had a little public space out front. And I looked, and there was I meant to include an image of it, but this very striking bright red piece of public art that was installed out front. And I was like, oh, yes, that must be through this program, but it was really nice to see something kind of enliven that area. Other ideas?
Well, yeah, I've got one. You could maybe go down along Indian River Drive, again, down on the intercoastal, that portion of the road. That's a very nice road. A lot of people drive that road just to take drives because they're right on the water. And that part of Indian River Drive that's in St. Lucie County along the shoreline would probably be an interesting out-of-the-way place, for public art as people are driving up and down.
Absolutely.
I have an idea. Recently, neighborhoods have gone through, have named themselves. They voted on what they wanted to name their particular neighborhood. Maybe something along those lines that's particularly for that neighborhood. That would be an idea.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's something we've talked about, and I don't know if you can see it or not if you're looking at my screen, but that's actually the map that I have up. Is from the city, from the person that is working on that kind of neighborhood naming process. And I think that we've actually talked about that as a really good opportunity to help kind of distinguish these different neighborhoods throughout the city, and celebrate the work that's being done as part of that.
Yeah, there was a big push to do this, coinciding with the construction of the Crosstown Expressway,
which also has a piece of public art on it.
Yeah,
and below it.
I got a piece on a utility box. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? All right. Well, like I said, feel free to, if something pops in your head, just let us know, or you can type it in the chat. So that's really all I had for you in terms of talking about, what we're doing. But if you guys have questions about anything to do with public art in Port St. Lucie, I would love to take those questions and hopefully answer them, or or give them to Patty if I don't know the answer, or at least, you know, take your thoughts. So any other general thoughts or questions?
No, I'll just be driving around looking for places.
Yeah.
where
Well,
I see them.
you know, in that vein, and I should have put it right on here, but please do send thoughts or questions to me in the future. My email address is it's josh@designinglocal.com. And so I'm happy to take your thoughts. And, you know, we will definitely include as much of that in the plan as we can. Other thoughts or questions?
I think Joanne has my email address as well. You can communicate with me. This is Patty.
Patty
Yes,
Eddington,
absolutely.
Patty Eddington, or a different Patty?
Patty Tobin from the city.
Oh, okay. Hi, Patty.
Let's see, I think C. Brown, is that Chris? I don't think we can hear you.
I don't know. I could hear her. No.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Hi.
That's
Joanne.
Hello.
Yeah, it's Joanne.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I have had no sound for the first 12 minutes, and then I realized I could call on the phone to hear you, and then I didn't know how to get unmuted. But thank you so much. This is fabulous, and it's very exciting. And yes, Patty, I will, you know, keep in touch with you. And I'm not sure. Well, one of my questions was, I don't know if I missed it at the beginning, and now I lost my screen. Anyway, when will things? I know we're in the midst of, you know, all of this. But when do you plan to have things, you know, start? Like, I know you had talked about a call to artists at some point in the future. I don't know when, you know, that is, or.
I'm ready to wrap that up. That's for the artwork on 7 existing bus shelters. And and we have the other 3 projects in process now. One is the Imagine sculpture at the Botanical Gardens, and one is the roundabout sculpture at Bayshore and Selvets. And then we're also working on a temporary piece here at City Hall, which will rotate out every couple of years. I saw what Brown was asking about the wall.
Yes.
With St. Lucie. That's not in the works to get redone in the near future. We are doing a mural at Minsky Gym. Hopefully that will be completed right around the end of this year. Our schedules are definitely being affected by this virus, supplies, kind of thing. So from what our artists have told us. So it might have a greater impact than I'm envisioning right now.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's something to look forward to. I just think it's very exciting that all of this is starting, and I'm so happy to meet Josh and really appreciate you putting this all together for us today.
Absolutely. So excited, and definitely excited to connect with artists in Port St. Lucie. It's a really exciting time, I think, despite the virus, because we are moving forward with this project, and I think the results are going to be really good. I feel a lot of good energy, and I know there's appetite to do things at the city level. So we'll be looking forward to sharing more information with you all when we have it. Like I said, we're kind of retooling our engagement plans, but as we move forward, I'll definitely share it all with Joanne, and she can get information out to you, and we're going to have more of an active website for the city and other things. So look forward to that. And I just want to repeat that if anybody has any additional questions in the future, feel free to shoot me an email at josh@designinglocal.com, or Joanne can connect you with Patty. So thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to hopefully meeting you all in person sometime
Yeah,
during as part of this project.
probably in the fall. sometime.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'll sign off for now. Yeah, question?
I said, thank you, John.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
And yes, Doris, good comment. Everybody, please do fill out the survey. Just go to cityofpsl.com/public-art and share that on social media as well. That will be very helpful to us.
Great. We're doing that.
Thanks.
So
Thank you,
thanks
Pat.
again.